Hi, I'm Garrett, and we are going to discuss the lyrics to one of our albums. This is our third album. It's called When the End Began. And the first thing you may notice is that it is a continuation of the weird sentence we're writing. The night God slept, everything was sound. When the end began. This album deals very heavily with, I would say, three major themes. The first of which is apocalypse. And I feel like I should qualify that. What do I mean when I say apocalypse? I don't mean Bruce Willis and Armageddon with a meteor coming crashing towards the earth, as much as I do love bare-chested Bruce Willis. The word apocalypse now does, for most people, mean, fiery end of the world. Whereas apocalypse in Greek, the language it comes from, means basically paradigm shift. It means new vision. It means revelation. And this album is going to look at a bunch of apocalypses, a bunch of revelations, both sort of vast existential revelations about the nature of the world that we know, but also, I would say, micro-apocalypse is just kind of a term that I've started to use. I think I've made it up, but we'll say micro-apocalypse is fundamental shifts that happen within the person and connecting those. The second major theme in this album is the idea of eternal return, eternal recurrence, and where I get the idea of when the end began. I'm connecting apocalypse with eternal return because I think those ideas are necessarily connected. That apocalypse, these fundamental paradigm shifts where we discover something so profound that everything in our reality and everything in our world has to change when we discover them. When we encounter a truth that's so profound that we have an epiphany, that these truths are eternal and they continue as circles, like the Gnostic symbol of Ouroboros, the snake that eats his head and turns for in eternity. Such is the nature of truth and is the nature of apocalypse. That apocalyptic events occur and they return, they turn into it themselves. And we see this idea of the eternal return in Western philosophy by way of Nietzsche and Camus' myth of Sisyphus. You see that in the Bhagavad Gita. This idea of light being annihilated and returning. And so you see it in the book of Ecclesiastes, and all these different belief systems in religions. Notice the function of truth, that if something's true, that you're going to see it return again and again. So these themes that I'm discussing, both the historic ones and the personal ones, are all connected because they all share this property of returning, and matter itself functions largely in that way too. Some cosmologists even believe that the moment of our universe existing, whether you're religious or not, the Big Bang, the idea that from nothing, ex nihilo, something came. A lot of people believe that eventually our universe will basically collapse and start again. So even the nature of matter itself could very well be cyclical, returning from nothing to something to nothing to something. And finally, this album is going to be looking at the crisis of the modern world and the modern life. So you'll see that all of these stories, unlike our some of our previous albums, go way back in history. This is dealing with 1933 and forward. So once again, we're going to have apocalypse. We're going to have eternal return. And we're going to have the crisis of the modern world as we know it. These are the themes that we deal with in When the End Began. And we'll get into how that all comes together.